I was born into the Garden of Light on a frigid January morning, delivered not in a hospital, but on the dirt floor of our cabin by an elder woman named Sister Ruth. My first breaths were filled with wood smoke and the sharp scent of herbal tinctures. My parents, Clara and James, had joined the community in 1987, 2 years before my birth, seeking refuge from what Father Saul called the decadent decay of modern life. They were idealists, disillusioned by Reagan-era politics and the AIDS crisis, and Father Saul's promises of purity and purpose hooked them like a lifeline. The garden was nestled in a remote valley, surrounded by towering pines and razor-wire fencing. To outsiders, we were a self-sufficient spiritual collective, but inside, we were prisoners of dogma. Father Saul, a former salesman turned messiah, ruled with a blend of charisma and cruelty. His sermons, delivered at dawn in a drafty barn, warned of an impending apocalypse only he could navigate. "The world beyond these mountains is Sodom," he'd thunder, his silver beard catching the light. "Here, we are the Ark." Children were the garden's most tightly controlled resource. At age 6, we began daily instruction in the doctrine, handwritten pamphlets that condemned democracy, medicine, and even birthdays as vanities. We learned to read using verses from Father Saul's sacred scrolls, which he claimed were channeled from angels. My sister Mara, 4 years my senior, was my only ally. She taught me to question in whispers. Once, she showed me a crumpled National Geographic page she'd found in the trash, a photo of the Grand Canyon. "They say it's a sinful place," she sneered. "But look at it. It's just Earth." Life was a rhythm of labor and liturgy. Women cooked, gardened, and mended clothes. Men hunted, built structures, and enforced Father Saul's edicts. At 12, I was deemed old enough to work full days in the terraced vegetable plots. My hands blistered from hoes, my skin burnt under the California sun. The elders monitored us for signs of weakness. Once I collapsed from heat exhaustion, and Brother Eli, a hulking enforcer, dumped a bucket of icy creek water on me. "The body is a vessel for the divine," he said. "Discipline it." Mara's rebellion began subtly. She'd leave pebbles in the shape of question marks outside my bunk, or hum pop songs under her breath while we scrubbed laundry. At 16, she was caught reading a contraband novel, To Kill a Mockingbird, hidden in her mattress. The punishment was a week in the stillness room, a windowless shed where she was given only bread and water. When she emerged, her eyes were hollow, but her defiance burned brighter. Then, one autumn night, she woke me, her fingers cold on my wrist. "I'm leaving," she whispered. "Come with me." My heart hammered. Father Saul had warned that traitors would be struck down by God's wrath, their souls devoured by wolves. I shook my head. Mara kissed my forehead and slipped into the darkness. By dawn, the entire compound knew. Father Saul assembled us in the barn, his voice trembling with performative grief. "Mara has chosen damnation," he said. "Pray for her, but never speak her name again." 3 weeks later, my mother had always been fragile, a bird-like woman with a poet's soul. She joined the garden hoping to find meaning, but the years of malnourishment and fear eroded her. After Mara's disappearance, she withered. Her cough turned violent, staining her handkerchiefs crimson. I begged the elders to let her see a doctor. "Medicine is a false idol," Sister Ruth snapped. "Prayer will heal her." I nursed her in our cabin, crushing elderberries and yarrow into bitter teas. One night, she gripped my hand, her nails biting my skin. "Listen to me," she gasped. "Mara was right. This place, it's a lie. When I'm gone, run." Her words terrified me. Even on her deathbed, she feared the microphones Father Soul planted in the walls. She died at 3 a.m., her last breath a ragged sigh. The elders buried her at the edge of the cemetery, beside other doubters. No ceremony, no marker, just raw earth. That night, I lay awake, replaying her words. For the first time, I allowed myself to hate. The doctrine, the fences, Father Soul's smug certainty. The next morning, I volunteered for supply duty, a monthly trek to the nearest town, Reading. The task was reserved for trusted members, and I'd never been chosen before. Brother Eli eyed me as I loaded crates of herbal salves into the truck. "Keep your head down," he warned. "No straying." Reading was a shock. Neon signs, traffic lights, people laughing into cell phones. While Brother Eli haggled at the feed store, I lingered by a newspaper rack. A headline screamed, "Missing woman linked to Northern California cult." My pulse spiked. I pocketed the paper, hiding it under my tunic. Back in the garden, I devoured the article by flashlight. It described a lawsuit against Father Soul by a former member who'd escaped, a woman named Lydia. She accused him of forced labor, child marriage, and murder. Murder! My mother's face flashed in my mind. That night, I began stockpiling supplies, dried apples, a stolen knife, $207 in crumpled bills from under Sister Ruth's mattress. I was sent to Reading again. This time, I acted. While Brother Eli napped in the truck, I darted into the library, my hands shaking as I typed Garden of Light into a computer. Dozens of hits, survivor blogs, FBI bulletins, a podcast titled Escaping Saul. I scribbled notes on scrap paper, my handwriting frantic. Suddenly, a shadow fell over me. "You okay?" A man in his late 20s stood nearby, holding a hiking guide. He had kind eyes and a scar on his chin. Panic surged. Was he an enforcer? But then I noticed his Stanford sweatshirt, the latte in his hand. A civilian. "I'm fine," I muttered, slamming the computer shut. He hesitated, then slid a napkin toward me. "I'm Daniel. You look like you could use a friend." His number was scrawled in blue ink. The ride back to the garden was agony. Brother Eli eyed me, silent. That night, I dreamt of wolves chasing me through Reading streets. Came in December, snapping at my heels. Father Soul summoned me to the barn, where elders sat in a semicircle. "Sister June," he intoned, "you've been chosen to wed Brother Ephraim, a great honor." Brother Ephraim was 40, with rotted teeth and fists that had left bruises on other wives. I nodded, numb. That night, I unearthed my stash. At 2 a.m., I crept past the outhouses, my boots crunching on frost. The gate was padlocked, but I'd practiced climbing the fence for weeks. Halfway up, a voice shouted, "Who's there?" I froze. Brother Eli's flashlight beam swept the ground. Heart in my throat, I dropped, rolling under a truck. He paced for an eternity, muttering about rats before retreating. The fence tore my palms, but I didn't feel it. I ran until dawn, my breath fogging the air. Guided by the North Star Mara had taught me to follow. At a gas station, I called Daniel. The truck smelled like he answered on the first ring. He didn't ask questions as I shivered in the passenger seat, just handed me a blanket. The shelter in Sacramento was a crumbling Victorian house with rainbow stickers on the door. Rosa, the director, had survived a cult herself. "You're safe now," she said. But I didn't believe her. The first year was a gauntlet. I flunked my GED twice, overwhelmed by math and essays. Nightmares left me screaming in hostile dorms. I jumped at sirens, hid knives under my pillow. Trusting Daniel was hardest. His kindness felt like a trick. Rosa's support group saved me. Around a scarred table, we shared stories. Ex-Moonies, ex-Scientologists, ex-fundamentalists. A man named Javier spoke of being shunned by his family for leaving the Eiffels. "They're still waiting for me to rot in hell." He laughed, but his eyes were wet. Therapy unearthed buried rage. I smashed plates in a parking lot, screamed at Father Soul's phantom. Slowly, I rebuilt. GED, community college. Later, I sat across from Mara in a Portland cafe. Her hair was purple now, her arms tattooed with galaxies. We'd reconnected through a private investigator. She'd fled to Canada, married a teacher, raised twin boys. "I tried to find you," she said, gripping my hand. "But the garden, it was like a black hole." We talked for hours, swapping stories of panic attacks and first movies. Titanic, for both of us, and learning to trust doorknobs. "Remember the pebbles?" She grinned. "I left them so you'd know doubt was possible." Today I advocate for cult survivors, lobbying for stricter laws against coercive groups. The garden still operates, though Father Saul's death in 2022 fractured its ranks. Sometimes I drive past the valley, staring at the fences. I don't hate him anymore. Hate is a cage. But I won't forget. Freedom, I've learned, is a daily choice. To eat ice cream for breakfast, to vote, to love recklessly. The world isn't Sodom. It's a messy, dazzling mosaic, and I'm finally part of it.